Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Just Another Esports podcast. Once again, joined by me, your host, Nicholas Shady Bacon, and my co host, Mr. Kevin Hubers. You might not have expected us to be uploading an episode this week, since I said we'd be doing it consistently every 2 weeks. But you know what? We have some time, and I think it's important to go over these matches and give our predictions for the upcoming week. So we are going to be doing an episode, I guess, each week that we kind of do have some form of play for Call of Duty, and then probably during the off season we'll see what happens there with episodes. We'll probably obviously go back to that 2 week time span, and we'll probably talk on some different topics outside of Call of Duty since off season is most definitely the off season. There's not too much going on there, but we had an interesting set of matches. I guess upsets you could say in the forms of Seattle and then as well as with London. I mean, you could most likely say those were upsets since those were the bottom two teams in the league. So our predictions were not too great. I believe we were both 50% on the weekend, so not terrible, but not amazing. Since we have had some weekends where I believe we're at an 80% correctness. That's
Yeah.
terrible wording there, but where we've gotten 80% of the matchups right. And I decided to go with a little bit of a pattern with my predictions, a little bit of a right wrong pattern throughout the entire weekend of matches. So hoping to improve on that. But diving into the matches that we did have, we kicked off the week with Atlanta versus the New York Subliners. So this was probably the most cut and dry of the matchups that we could have had. Obviously, I think in our predictions, we thought the Dallas Seattle matchup was going to be the biggest blowout of the weekend in
Yeah.
terms of our predictions, at least. But that was not the case. Seattle actually kind of decided to come into some semblance of a form this weekend, which
Yeah,
was
they're
very
a
interesting.
team?
And we'll talk about, uh, yeah, they're a team. We'll talk about moving on to the next matchup on Thursday, which was them. But Atlanta still kind of displaying absolute dominance in competition, taking New York Subliners 3-1 in that matchup. You have any takeaways from that one?
Uh, honestly, like I thought New York would do better, but right now FaZe is just too hot. Like, I mean, we were both right on the money as far as predictions go, but at the same time, like, I mean, with such a solid performance in the major from the subliners, you would imagine that, they would have put up some semblance of a fight, but it really didn't look like that. They FaZe is just I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this was a bit of like New York, like all the teams I guess had just kind of made changes into kind of how they played slightly with the meta change. I don't know exactly how much it changes the game realistically, moving from the XM4 to the QBZ. These both were teams that were against the meta change, which I think kind of made this a bit of an interesting matchup, maybe you could say, since they were both teams against it. And so you're expecting maybe them both to be a little bit weaker in this meta compared to the prior meta. However, kind of in this first matchup, Atlanta didn't really seem to skip a beat. In New York, it's kind of felt like they were maybe finding themselves a little bit in this first matchup up against the Atlanta FaZe, since they definitely did turn it around come the end of Sunday, where they went up against the LA Thieves. So I think maybe this was them figuring things out a bit in this match in like an official matchup, since prior to that they were just kind of doing scrims. And also New York, it feels like they're kind of like either hot or cold. Uh,
Yeah.
Even though they are in the upper echelon, like they've had some blowout games, a bunch of 3-0s, but they've also had games where they just aren't able to turn it around. And so I think if we see a hot New York up against Atlanta, I think this could definitely go the distance. But if we just see kind of a middle New York or a cold New York, especially, it they're just going to get blown out by Atlanta, since they're just too good of a team right now. I mean, they're what 12-2 in S&Ds. I think New York actually took an S&D off of Atlanta FaZe, so that was very impressive from them.
Yeah, that's true.
Uh, but like outside of that, I mean, you just kind of look at everything else. They're 10-0 match record. They have not lost a match. They're 12-4 in hardpoint. and they're 8-3 in their weakest mode being control. Um, and one thing, and this was an interesting thing since I was looking at some of the team stats because we do have some roster change that we'll talk about a bit later on. But like one of the things people equate to fast teams is engagements per 10 minutes or whatever.
Right.
Right? Correct? Like I'm
Yeah,
correct
yeah,
in
yeah,
saying that.
absolutely.
The speed of a team, a lot of people attribute to the number of engagements they get per 10 minutes. What if I was to tell you Atlanta FaZe has the least engagements per 10 minutes out of every team in the league?
Pretty unbelievable actually. That's kind of it's kind of crazy. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah, that was something I found extremely interesting when I was looking in Hardpoint. I'm not sure about in Control or in kind of Search and Destroy, but you look at Hardpoint as kind of the fastest pace mode out of those.
Yeah,
Obviously,
for
Search and
sure.
Destroy isn't a respawn, and Control it's a respawn, but it's a much slower paced form of respawn. And so that was something that was very interesting that I found. Yeah, they have the lowest average engagements per 10 minutes out of any team in the league. The other team right above them is Minnesota. But outside of that, yeah, they they have the least engagements per 10 minutes, which crazy stat. So that's definitely something we're gonna have to kind of, I think, keep our eyes on. And their engagements per 10 minutes for all four players are incredibly close together. I think it's like plus and minus like 2.2 or something between the slowest player and the fastest player on the team, which is incredibly close when compared to some of the other teams in the leagues. I think the LA Gorillas specifically, who have the player on the team with the most engagements per 10 minutes in Vivid at 54.7,
Really?
which is astronomically high.
Yeah, how
Uh,
in the world? That's got to be a typo,
yeah,
right?
I I don't know. It's on breakingpoint.gg. Maybe we'll have to give the stat guys over there a call. Be like, hey, can you double check this because it is a bit crazy. And in comparison, the other four players or the other three players on his team, the second highest being Apathy, is only at 45.2. So there's literally a 9 engagement difference between the second fastest player on the team and the fastest in Vivid for that, which I think could definitely cause a lot of pacing issues within teams. So I think that like that's not the only stat obviously that's important, but that was just something that I found interesting and something that was interesting to like see kind of the variation between the top teams and the bottom teams and kind of how close all of those stat lines kind of compare within your core four.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. Honestly, whenever it comes down to it, like stats are stats are stats, but I mean, FaZe definitely does play the game differently. And I maybe that's it. Maybe what we're really seeing is um the difference between being a breaking team versus like like a setting team or like a get the setup going on for hard points. Um I don't know. And do you notice anything different about their control style?
With Atlanta FaZe and their
Yeah.
control. Uh, no, no, I haven't seen. I don't think I've
That's
seen
kind of
anything.
that's kind of thing. So, I mean, the only thing that I can really think of that would skew the statistics of engagements across a team um would be their hard point, just because they play hard point radically different than every other team in the league because they can. It's FaZe.
Yeah, like they're not always breaking hills, but they definitely have the ability to break hills. It's definitely something to look into. It seems kind of like they're not playing too fast, so that they're not playing fast enough to make us mistakes, and they're not playing slow enough for people to capitalize off of that pacing.
Yeah,
So it might just be that they're in like a sweet spot for the way they're playing the maps in Hardpoint, that they're just able to capitalize on other teams' mistakes while being able to kind of ensure that they aren't making any and kind of keep a very solid consistency throughout. Because
yeah,
I mean, you look
they're
at the
definitely
hard points
consistent.
they've lost, they're only losing the hard points by like 20 points. It's not a lot. It's very slim margins that they've been losing their hard points by it in the 4 that they have lost out of their 16. So very, very scary team. But I think it's time to move on to Seattle versus Florida, which was kind of the first upset of the weekend, I think, in
Crazy.
our eyes and a bunch of teams' eyes. It was the battle of the sea, battle of the ocean. There's got to be a better term for it, but right now is the two aquatic teams facing off. I had Florida taking it 3-2. You had Florida taking it 3-1, and it went 3-1 in the way of Seattle.
I at least had the numbers right.
Yeah, at least had the numbers right. Just flip them around. But yeah, so what do you think this was another case of just Florida's inconsistencies? Since that's kind of really been kind of the talking point of Florida. They've just it's kind of similar to New York, but at like a lower level than New York. Like if a hot New York faced off against a hot Florida, I think I would probably take a hot New York. Um, maybe you can like disagree with that, and maybe like New York's just been hot more consistently than Florida. But I
So
like
so here,
Florida just kind of flip flop.
here's what I think about Florida right now. Or just this game in general. This game specifically, I think if you're Seattle, you get absolutely embarrassed in the major by Florida. I mean, you let Skies go on what an 11, and it wasn't even like fair 11. You let Wake go in and smash you in control. Like, you get put on a poster, so to speak. You see your Twitter clip all over the place, but it's not you that's you know, doing the cool stuff. It's you doing the dying part. That gets to you, right? So I think that's a little bit of what this match was first is Seattle coming out with fire. They have to. At this point, you've got 4 guys that are looking to just prove themselves. They demanded to be in the spot that they're in. Um, and then yeah, on the other side, I think Florida is one of those teams that is really inconsistent. Sometimes you do have absolute nuts games, and then other games you lose to Seattle. So it's kind of tumultuous right now. And yeah, I will agree. I think that New York is the more consistent team, albeit inconsistent. Um, they're just. I think they're just in the soup. I really do like this. Kind of like hammers down the fact that like there's really only like 3 teams in this league, and then the other 9 are kind of just there. You know.
Yeah, it might not be too far to say that there's really only one team in the there's like Atlanta FaZe, and then
Yeah.
you
Right
kind
now.
of at least currently you have like Atlanta FaZe, and you got Chicago and Dallas with New York kind of flittering the lines there, and then you kind of just have everyone else because the point differential is pretty massive if you kind of look at the standings because you have Atlanta FaZe over with I think it's 145 points now or something like that. And then you have Dallas, Optic, Chicago or Subliners and the LA Thieves all at like 100 and between 120 and like 90 points. And then all the way down in 6, you have the Gorillas and everyone below them at 50. So there's a 40-point gap between 5th and 6th, and there's a 35-point gap between 1st and 2nd. So you can really kind of branch the teams into those kind of 3 categories if you really just wanted to throw a really lazy kind of power rankings of just Atlanta FaZe, the 2nd through 5th place teams. Maybe you like move LA Thieves out of there, potentially drop them down into the soup, and then you have literally everyone else just
Right.
swimming around in there.
So I think that's just the case of what this game was. So yeah, I mean, I don't really have much else to say about it because realistically, um, it means nothing for either team. It doesn't show us anything that we didn't already know. I mean, I guess it shows that like Seattle's got a breath of life, but do
Yeah,
they
I think
really?
it definitely matters for the major and for kind of making champs since only the top 8 teams are making champs this year.
Right.
And the bottom 8 I don't think are getting like any money at all, which definitely, I mean, you have a salary, but you definitely want some more. Uh, you definitely want some more cash added onto that. You just don't want to get paid your base salary and not have any prize winnings for the entire year. I know Seattle already went through a year like that, where literally Octane lost more in fines than he got in prize money. Uh,
Yeah,
I don't think he's been fined yet this year, but still,
he's keeping it
he's
clean.
still in the negative from last year. So probably wants to at least make it to champs, if not at least come out with some type of victory at some of these majors. But what do you think is causing the Muniers level of inconsistency? Do
It's
you
kind
think
of a
you can
tough one.
pinpoint it to anything? Because I mean,
Um,
I'll bring up like the engagements per 10 minutes again. Not everything. I know.
right.
I liked looking at this stat for across all the teams, so I'm gonna just kind of mention it briefly, I think, throughout this podcast when we're going over these matches, just to kind of like be like, oh hey,
Right.
look at this. Um so some of the roster changes I do think are some you can attribute some of the roster changes to kind of some of the variances that we're seeing between players in rosters with this stat. But with Florida, you have Neptune, Awakening, and Skies all at like 56, or not at 56, at 46 to 45. And then you have Slacked all the way down at 41. So
Yeah, but he's your route
between
man.
Yes. So so your route man's going to be getting significantly less engagements per 10
He's
minutes.
doing his job. Yeah.
Okay. All right. See, that's why I have you over here being the brains,
Yeah. I
seeing
mean,
seeing more than just the numbers. Because I looked at, I'm like, that's a huge difference between like where he's at and where the other players are at on the map, which I think can definitely negatively affect them if the route man isn't pulling off successful routes. Like he's not successful in either getting to a spot and getting multiple kills, or if he's getting picked off while he's making that route.
right.
Because then that puts your team in essentially a 3v4 situation quite frequently. And maybe kind of like it makes sense. Like if Slacked is your route man, he's kind of going to be the key player. Even though you look at your key players on this roster as being Awakening Skies and Neptune, it's really kind of Slack that plays the key role in if they're
He
going to win the match or
he
not.
does all the extra stuff that I mean, like it's you've always got that kind of guy. I mean, Karma was that guy for Optic later on. Whenever it was just it was about time for him to retire. You have guys like Aches for LAG or whatever. I mean, like their gun skill is still good enough to compete and everything like that, but they just innately know how to play the game because they've just been doing it for that long. Slacked and guys like him who have a really good understanding of like the flow of the map and where people are going to be can do a much better job at avoiding those people in order to put himself in a good position. And that's kind of the thing that you only get from just COD sense over years. And I mean, when you have a vet like Slacked, that's where you would want to put him. So I don't I don't necessarily disagree that it's Slack's problem. Um, but I would also say that like any given Sunday, Skies can drop like a .79 or something, and I guess it's just like you know, I mean, it comes down to the gunny at that point. Your main AR, like you're the one who's supposed to be like getting in some of the most engagements along with your sub players, and Wake can be inconsistent, but he's probably the most consistent player on the roster.
Yeah, at the
Um,
current time.
at the current time, but at sometimes, I mean, it's just like I mean, it really does come down to like I mean, somebody just doesn't got it. So what I really do think that means is that it's just that everybody doesn't got it. Like nobody's really figured it out yet. Um, you know, they're still working. Who knows if they'll come into like some sort of form? But we know that COD's a momentum-based game. We've talked about that a lot on this podcast, and Um, maybe they just need to like hit that good stride and then get back into things. And who knows? They beat FaZe. They're the only team that's been able to beat FaZe. Granted, it
Yes, they
was
beat
during
them
it was
during the
it was during the
kickoff
preseason.
classic.
It was during the glorified scrim, but I mean, they showed everybody it was these four guys versus the same four guys that are currently on FaZe in front of everybody on camera. Um, so
Yeah.
I'm just saying they have the potential, and it's just a momentum thing. It could be completely confidence based. Who knows? So,
With the move to 4v4, do you think the that kind of route man lurker role is more effective and important
um,
compared to 5v5?
so I would say that your route man is probably going to be most effective in. It just depends on how the spawn mechanic works. This one is very dependent on location. So if you have a certain amount of guys in like specific parts of the map, then you know that's preferentially where you'll spawn. So it's not squad spawns like Modern Warfare, where it was like, just getting a part of the map, and that's where just where your team's gonna spawn. And if you guys are all clustered together, then you're all right there. Um, it's a little different. Uh, and what I mean by that is like you can push out spawns pretty easily in this one. And one guy can flip. So the route man is probably a little bit more important just because it literally could just be one guy that gets spawns for the next. And it's just whoever's farther back, usually.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that was a pretty good conversation there with kind of the players. Well, all right. Well, I guess moving through Florida and looking at Seattle, kind of, do you think there was anything specifically with Seattle that was working for them this weekend? I know Pristini obviously had big games. I think
Yeah, he
throughout the
did.
weekend, both against Florida and against Dallas. So that's going to be something that we'll have to keep an eye on to see if he's able to keep that level of performance. Because this was kind of the first time that it felt like Pristini actually came into the role of a Slayer, which was what he had set out to do with joining this team and what he said he was going to do at the start of the season. But this was kind of the first time we saw an inkling of that.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you say you're the Slayer and you get shit on, like, I mean, like, not everybody can be simp. I'm just saying. Not everybody can run around and just impose their will on the map, especially at the professional level. And and I always thought that was like a funny claim of him. He's like, "Oh yeah, I want to be the Slayer." I'm like, "Okay, buddy. Like that's a tall order." And not to say that he's not a talented player. I personally don't think he's talented enough to shoot against the best and be a Slayer type role. I think his role is best. Um, think like United, where he was kind of like the flanker or kind of the he kind of was a route man, sort of. Um, but
He was more so there to kind of
yeah, you
facilitate the main slayers on the team
you let the
instead of
tiny
being the
terrors
main slayer.
and you let Clay and Arcides do their thing, and you kind of just work around it. Um, you had a ton of talent on that team. Fast forward to Florida where he was doing really well and he was in good form. Um, you take a look at that. He kind of falls off for a little bit. Optic picks him up. Well, sorry, not Optic. Chicago Huntsmen pick him up. Um, and they don't even think it's a good fit. And I mean, whenever you go through all those options and you go down the list, I mean I'm just saying, it's I think there's a fire under his ass is what this really comes down to. I really do think that like Rossini's starting to feel the pressure. Um, he's kind of he's moved around the league more than anybody else. Um, and that's got to get to you, right? So this, like I said, this is a big game for him to really come back out and and show that he can be like he deserves to be in the league. He deserves to be on Seattle, and Seattle's worth it. But we're gonna need to see way more repeat performances of this against teams that aren't known to be inconsistent. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
yeah, and this was the first weekend that they actually did get a control win. I don't know if it was in the series against Florida or if it was in their series against Dallas, but they are now 1-7 in control. Really abysmal record. Obviously, we know Seattle was abysmal in Dom last year, and unless that gets like, I don't think they're ever going to win a major. I don't think they're going to be even top four at any point this season. Um, but they can definitely at least survive inside the soup instead of being at the bottom and just being burnt, the burnt piece of potato or whatever that no one wants.
hey, somebody's got to be 12th. There's 12 teams. Somebody's got to be 12th. That's how
Yeah,
it goes.
if they improve their control, I think they can at least survive in the soup. So since you look at kind of their hard point, they're 6-8 in that. You look at their search, which is actually their best game mode. Technically, they're 5-6. So I think they're really good checkmate. They're like 3-1 on that for some reason. They really like playing that map in search. But that's like a really straightforward search map where everyone just fights for plane control though. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to expand their map pool, because if they're banking on just winning checkmates, all anyone has to do is ban a checkmate and control, and then
Yeah. Then
or
then what
search and destroy, and
then what
then they're not.
happens?
Yeah, and then what happens? So uh,
I mean, I will say that you like they didn't really feel like I didn't feel like they had any map under their belt, and at least feeling like they have a map under your belt. I mean, it's got to start somewhere. You gotta start somewhere with it. So
yeah. So Seattle upset Florida, win it 3-1. Then we move on to our Friday matchup with Toronto Ultra versus the LA Thieves. And this was, well, I had this being a 3-2, but I didn't expect it to almost go Toronto's way. Literally coming down to a 1v1 between Temp and Insight at one point for Temp to push it to a round 11 in the game 5 search and destroy. And honestly, Toronto kind of threw that search and destroy away. I think there was like one engagement someone pointed out where Insight actually threw the round away, even though, but like the guy he went 19 and like 4, 19 or 18 and like 6 or something like that on that game 5 S&D. So
yeah, like you can't
there
put that
was a
on that
mistake
guy.
that he made that costed him the round, and I think the 1v3 that he was doing or whatever at the time. But I don't want to focus on that too much, since I think he did a well enough job carrying his weight in that game 5, and he even really showed up in the game 4. I think it was just control where he really struggled a lot. But were you expecting Insight to come in and perform, I guess, as well as he did, seeing as how I know a lot
What,
of the
come in
pro
and set the kill
community?
record? Yeah. No, I did not. Does that answer your question? No, he popped
Yeah,
off. That was nuts. That was like, I mean, I couldn't imagine a better start. I mean, I can like, think of like Awakening last year, but I mean, he just really took off. Um, and he um Optic was actually talking about it. They were like, it's formal, and they were all memeing and everything. They're like, oh, no Zinni, no Winnie or whatever, and so they were like, oh, we gotta like shit on this kid, and that was the very first scrim, their host, everything like that, and Insight was just frying them, like absolutely having them so badly. Um, so I mean, I'm about it. I love to see it. And it's gonna be interesting um to watch them kind of figure things out. In other news, speaking of Toronto, it, Methods tweeted something and then quickly deleted the tweet. Um, not I don't know. It was like I think it was this morning. It was either this morning or last night. As of the recording. Um, and he I forget exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of like, not trusting like the closest to you or whatever. And seems like Methods will probably not be playing on Toronto Ultra. I don't
Do
even
you think
know.
that was in reference to the Ultra or his Challengers team? Because with how how kind of not toxic, fluid Challengers is with their roster changes, that I kind of just assumed that's what it was, even though yeah, I guess it could be Toronto and is maybe more likely something to do with Toronto, but I kind of figured that maybe it had something to do with Challengers.
I honestly could not tell you at this point. What I can tell you is that um, it's not a good look for sure. Um, and cat's out of the bag. I mean, you posted on Twitter, somebody's gonna get a screen cap, especially if it's juicy. They're gonna snap get it. Um, so if that's the case, then I mean, I don't know. If I was in charge of the org and I saw stuff like that coming out of the guy we just benched, I would feel like there's some animosity, there's some thickness in the air, and like Toronto is no, you know, they're not no slouch to that at this point. I mean, with all the Brack stuff last season, um,
Yeah.
but I mean, uh, it just seems like he's not happy there, and I still have no idea why they would drop him. None of the pros do. They all think it's kind of a joke. I mean, obviously they don't know what's going on in the org or anything like that, but
Yeah, do you think that the pros still consider it a joke with how Toronto performed this weekend? I mean, they put up a good fight against LA Thieves, although I don't know kind of what light we see the LA Thieves in now since I know they're making a roster change. We'll talk about that a bit more later when we discuss their matchups or their other
right.
matchup with New York. And then they also played Atlanta, where they kind of got, be honest, dismantled.
Yeah, they got
But
shit
I
on.
mean, that's Atlanta phase. So, and it's not like Insight performed bad by any means. He played extremely well. And so I think he more than came in and fulfilled like kind of his role within the team in replacing methods. Uh, and so like what more does he need to do for the pros to be like, oh yeah, this change makes sense? I mean, to me it makes sense. It has made sense.
Um, I I don't know. I really don't. What the methods change?
Yeah,
That one makes
I feel
absolutely
like
no
a lot
sense.
of I feel like a lot of people's frustration with the methods changes. One, they didn't explain why, which I don't think they realistically need to. Like they don't need to explain themselves. I know Minnesota does. LET, like Minnesota actually like in depth explains their roster changes and stuff, which we'll talk about theirs when we get to them. LA Thieves, they
They
talked
posted a
about it a
video,
bit.
yeah.
Like Toronto, they don't really talk about the roster changes at all because I think one, they happen so frequently
Right.
and whatnot. Um, I don't know the reasoning behind them always, but like this, I feel like everyone could kind of see this change coming eventually, but like potentially if they felt like change needed to be made within the roster. Insights an AR player, Methods is an AR player. They got him as a substitute. You kind of look at the differences, and I'm going to go to the engagements per 10 minutes thing because I know we talked about Slack. His was a lot lower, but Slack's the route man. Methods is a lot lower compared to everyone on his team. He's at 43 per 10 minutes in hard points when every other player on his team is at 48 or 46. And so he's not the route man on the team. So he should be playing close with his like ARs to be able to
Yeah.
trade them out or whatever from a distance. And so you bring Insight in. I know it's only been 2 matches, and I think he played probably three hard points. Four, no, I think he played 4 hard points since they did go to a game 4 against Atlanta FaZe, I do believe. But he's at a 46, so he's right up there with the other players on his team. And so like maybe that's what they saw. Like that's only one aspect of the game, and there's probably a bunch of others, but I don't feel like this changes as outlandish as people are making it seem. And I think a lot of it is just because Methods is a really good face for a team. He has a pretty darn good social media following. He's a very charismatic person on camera.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's
And
definitely a
it's
meme
not like he's a
aspect.
bad player either. And so I feel like a lot of the flack that Toronto is getting is simply because a lot of people like Methods as a person, and maybe not so much because the change doesn't actually make sense. Because I think you could definitely make a case for this roster change making sense, and we don't even have like all of the facts. Like we're just looking at like one stat line, which obviously is probably a very bad thing to do if you were to actually be a general manager for a team. But that's at least
Well,
like
sure.
one point that you can try and build off of to make a case. Like to make a case, you always have to find at least one point and build off of it to try and find some more. But it's at least like one piece of evidence that you can put to Toronto's case for making this roster change.
I, I, st- I'm still not convinced. Like Insight, yeah, he played great, but I mean, I'm saying that methods wasn't the issue in the first place because they're still losing. A,
Yes, that's
B,
definitely true.
B. Um, they don't really look that much better. You know, it's not just the losing part either. It's like, I mean, yeah, you lose games and everything. You're still trying to figure shit out as a team. You know, you just picked up a new guy, but the other aspect that goes into it is um, I think that there are objectively worse players on the team than Methods. Um, you know, to who it kind of comes any given Sunday, but I definitely didn't think at any time I was like, man, this Methods guy is just fucking he's costing him right now. That was not a thought that ever crossed my mind. It was always like, man, it's always Cammy. Oh man, classic. You know, I couldn't tell you who the problem was, but I knew something was off, and I don't really think that their performance was really that bad. I don't know. I don't think that this is all player related. I think this might be a little bit more internal than they'd like to admit. Um,
Yeah.
and knowing their history already, that might be the case. So, I would imagine that Methods is getting shipped off somewhere. Um,
Where to definitely be very interesting.
yeah, I mean, and he would be super helpful on a lot of teams. Like, he deserves a spot on a pro team. He deserves a spot on the Toronto Ultra, but they don't seem to, see the same way as I do. So, for whatever reason.
Yeah, with
Um,
this Toronto Ultra lineup and kind of with Seattle, they both have the same glaring weakness in their gameplay, and that's with control. Toronto's 2-8 in control. They've played one checkmate, one garrison. They've lost both of those, and they're 2-6 on raid. So they keep on defaulting to raid, but they're 2-6 on it.
yeah,
So,
yeah, I don't
and
know.
if they keep on defaulting to that, they must be even worse on garrison and checkmate, which is definitely not good. So, like their whole control game plan just seems incredibly bad right now. If the map that they played 8 times, they're only 2-6 on. That's
Yeah, their
like that.
pacing is
That
just completely
like
off. Or
it might, yeah, it might be like their control might be even worse than Seattle's. Just by looking at that, since I think Seattle's at least had some more parity in the maps that they played.
yeah, yeah, they definitely did. You know, Seattle's like, occasionally they'd show up on one map, and then there'd be, flare ups here and
Yeah,
there. They were
Seattle's.
they were inconsistent. Like Toronto's just bad. Like, and I really do think it's a pacing issue. I really do think that's what it comes down to is the the pace at whatever they're playing. Maybe that's why they didn't like Methods is because he's like traditionally a slower player. Control is a very fast paced game. For the average viewer, watching Control is probably a little hectic at times. Um,
Yeah.
because
If we're looking at if we're looking at their control engagements per 10 minutes, just like a generic look at their pacing, Methods is at 33 per 10. Uh Bance is at 35, Cammy's at 43, and then Kleenex is at 40. And now Insight's over there at 40 as well. So Insight and Kleenex are playing well off of each other. Cammy, I definitely need thinks needs to slow it down. Bance is your route man on that team, you're thinking realistically, so he's
Yeah.
probably fine where he's at.
Yeah,
And I
I
think
don't
Methods was probably fine. I think honestly their issues with control is that Cammy's probably just playing way too fast within the team.
yeah, that might be it. I mean, you got to have a couple of guys that are playing kind of fast down their throat, getting into the spawns and wreaking havoc on both sides, on defense and offense. But at the same time, I mean, if you're not doing anything useful with being in their spawn, then kind of is what it is. You have to depend on the rest of your team to be playing the game the right way too. So, um, maybe it is bans in this case because I mean, you don't necessarily have a route man in control. Everybody's kind of a route man in control. So everybody's got to run a
True.
route. You have to figure out where, like, the key with being successful in control is keeping a good
I
head
feel like
count on
that's
where
kind of
everybody
true
is.
for 4v4 in a sense. Like everyone's kind of the route man because there aren't squad spawns, so everyone needs to influence the map in a specific
Yes,
way.
yes, definitely. Um, but
So
for
the
like
kind of
hard
like
point,
route man role doesn't exist as much in a sense because it's like every player's responsibility to be where they need to be on the map to ensure that the enemy is spawning in a predictable way.
yes, I do agree. In hard point, when you are focused on the point currently, um, control, yes, everybody's a route man, but hardpoint, it's not just yes, you're focused on spawns for whatever the hill currently is, but the route man is the guy who's focused on next spawns normally. That's how you would play as a um that's how you would play hardpoint as a route man, is you would focus on the next spawns rather than what's going on currently. You're it's 35 seconds left in the hill and you're already thinking, all right, cool. Like which way, like where are the opponents at? Are they, four stacks somewhere? Are they 2-2 somewhere? Like where's the open lane that I can get around them and influence spawns for next? So, ideally, what you want to do is you want to flip out the spawns because most points are like across from each other. You want to flip out the spawns. You can give them good spawns for scrap, and then you're taking bad spawns, but bad spawns are better for new. So in effect, that's good spawns. So, uh, to say spawns are important in a respawn game mode is a little I don't know.
Obvious.
It's a little. Well, it's an understatement, truly. Because I mean, you don't really think about that. If you're the average person who just tunes into the CDL and you're like, oh yeah, like let me watch the game. Oh, why is this guy running to the back of the map? Doesn't he know that the hard point's over there? I go into league play. You have people still running it old with 6 seconds left, and you're like, yo,
Yeah.
guys, what are you doing? Like,
I'm
there's
not
a new
even
hill.
the best COD player, and I still get frustrated when I see idiots on my team just like, why are you here? What are you doing over here? Go
Right,
to the hill. Go to the next hill. Like,
right. I mean, you don't have that problem in the pros, but
no.
I mean, like, if you catch the route man, then all of a sudden your timing's off, right? You miscounted, you miscalculated as a route man. If you have a lot of engagements as a route man, you're probably not doing your job very well, unless you're winning those, in which case you're just a beast. But you can't depend on that every time. You absolutely cannot depend uh on winning every single gunfight in order to get spawns. It's not feasible in a league where the best players have like a 1.3 KD, 1.4 KD at most, and everybody else is kind of the middle of a pack, like 0.95 to 1. You're you're not gonna be winning every single gun battle. So the route man has to figure out how to do what he needs to do without getting hit. So those high engagements might be a problem.
Yeah.
So
Right now, the overall KD leaderboard simp, he's at a 1.28.
yeah, see, like,
Then you got Dashy at a 1.2, Celium at a 1.13, and then Formal and Aqua at a 1.11.
and that's about average every season. It's a fast-paced game.
Yeah.
These guys, they really really run at each other. They go hard. Um, So it is impressive to see streaks and stuff like that in the league. Just because I mean, usually you're just trading. Like that's how you play COD. You trade out
Yeah.
the lives and all that stuff.
The highest streak we've had in this CDL season, I think, is an 11 streak. Insight and Methods both have an 11 streak to their name. I believe one other player does. I think it's Aqua as well has an 11 streak. And speaking of Aqua, if
Skies does
you're
too.
okay,
Yeah,
Sky does too. If you're okay with moving on to the Paris versus Minnesota matchup,
yeah,
we
absolutely.
can do that.
Let's do it.
So both of us thought Minnesota would take it. I thought this was going to be a really close series. I feel like all the series I thought were going to be really close and could have gone like either way
Blowouts.
in a game 5 ended up being a blowout the way I didn't pick it to go. So I'm so upset about that. But Paris absolutely destroyed the rocker 3-0. What and Minnesota, we'll just skip to this because they also got 3-0'd by Florida, who lost to Seattle. So Minnesota this weekend was just down bad. They went 0-6 in map count.
Yeah.
And we've seen them make a change. Major Maniac is out and Standy is in. What are your thoughts on Standy and what are your thoughts on this roster change?
Why Major Maniac? That's my big thing. First of all, like I get it. Attach is he's one of your bread and butter guys. He's one of the better players on your team. You can't do anything with him. Priesta though, I mean, he's not an AR. He's a sub. So if you're trying to look to replace an AR, then and you feel like that's what you need. Um, which brings us to well, you know what? Now that I think about it, though, Major Maniac might be the right play. It's just I don't know. It doesn't feel right cutting any of those guys because they're all really good. So
They're all good, but they're just not working well together as a core four. And like you look at their we'll just focus on their hard point because that's what they've been struggling with the most. I mean, they've started to struggle with search and destroy as kind of we saw this weekend. They lost I think they're on a like they started the season off 5-0 in search and destroy, and now they're at a 6-4 record in that. They're 4-4 in control, so they're fine there, but they're 2-9 in hardpoint, and they have some pretty good variety of hardpoint maps that they have played so far. And so, like I think the big thing I've seen is like Priestess just hasn't been good this entire season. Their main Slayer's definitely been attached. He's definitely been the one putting up the biggest performance this season, and I feel like the change that would have made more sense to me, like I'm not certain what type of player Standy is, but I think it would have made more sense to see Major Maniac move up to kind of help attach as an SMG player and swap Priesta out. Like Major Maniac ran the AR last season, but he ran it for phase, so he was pretty much just a fake SMG player with an AR. And you look at his time on Genji, he wasn't an AR. He was an aggressive sub player up in the face with Envoy.
true.
So maybe you just give him the SMG back in hand, have him pair up with Attach, see how well that duo does. While Priesta works on his gameplay because he's definitely been the one underperforming the most. I mean,
Yeah,
you
for
have
sure.
Attach at a 1.03 KD overall in hardpoint. Then you have Major Maniac at a 0.99, and then you have Accuracy at a 0.91, and Priesta all the way at the bottom at a 0.89. So
I mean, I think that Priesta would be the problem, but I mean, like, if you feel like an AR is your problem, I don't think you can get rid of accuracy. I I think that
is
he's the
that what they think? They think an AR is the problem?
I, they've got to think it's some sort of like pacing thing. Maybe they think that making a pacing change works. I mean, Major Maniac was always the guy who kind of just I don't know. He was the odd man out in phase last year, in my opinion, because they would always send him on like weird routes and everything, and he would kind of go like lone wolf, which you could do in 5v5 with a team like that. Like with a team like that, you could send a guy like Major Maniac out. But the what I'm trying to highlight is he plays by himself. He prefers to do that. And it's not that he's not a team player or anything. I mean,
I mean,
any
he did
guy at
that
the
in
pros.
phase, but yeah, like going back to the BO4 Genji days, he didn't do that. I mean, he was an SMG monster in that game. He was insane. So I don't know like why they just don't send him back to what kind of got him a spot in the league.
Yeah, send him back to his roots, so to speak.
Yeah.
I, that's $1 million question there, Nick. I'm pretty sure if you figured that out, Minnesota have a spot for you.
I mean, it's just weird to me that Priesta isn't the one out. Like he's blatantly underperforming.
Like I said,
And
I mean, he's a sub. If they want to cut an AR, they feel like the AR is a problem. They're gonna cut an AR, and you literally cannot cut accuracy. So he's playing good. He's not the problem.
well, what is Standy coming in to do? Like, is Standy gonna be an SMG? Like you're saying, cut an AR, but you could just give Major Maniac an SMG.
No, no, I'm saying that they don't feel like Major Maniac's pacing as an AR works. So
Oh,
they're putting in Standy because they feel like Standy's AR pacing will be a little bit better for the team. Maybe like
okay,
get some of the pressure off Lamar, and make things a little bit easier. So that's
okay.
what I'm saying.
Okay, I think I understand you now. Yeah, I think Major Maniac currently, even though he's been running an AR this year and last year, I think it would be better to give him the AK-74U, swap out Priesta, pair him up with Attach, and bring Standy in. I think I would really like to see that since you look at kind of their roster's kind of weird for their engagements. I'm gonna bring it up. This I think is gonna be the last time I bring it up. Actually, no, I'll bring it up. We talk about LA Thieves, but that's about it.
Yeah,
Accuracy actually has the most engagements. Well, second most. Priesta has the most engagements per 10 minutes in hardpoint at 45.5. Accuracy's at 45, and then Attach and Major Maniac are both at around a 42.5. So I feel like you have Priesta kind of up with well, apparently his pacing's up there with accuracies. Don't understand that. Would have to look closer at the game. Um, and then you have Attach and Major Maniacs pacing close together. So like even more so, I feel like yeah, just give Major Maniac the SMG, take out Priesta, bring in Standy. Like it's a much bigger change since you're having a player change role and bringing in a new player instead of just bringing in a new player. But with like to be honest, with how Priest has been performing, I think it's definitely the better change and the change I would like to see be made. And who
yes,
knows? If you do that, you could probably honestly you could probably sell Priesta to 100 Thieves for a really pretty penny right about now.
yeah, that's true. I'm sure 100 Thieves would love to have Priesta. I am pretty positive of that. I think you're onto something there.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So I'm ready to move on from Minnesota.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Kudos to Paris. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about Minnesota there, but yeah, good job, Paris. Did good there. Unfortunately, their next matchup was against Chicago. And Chicago, yeah, they're pretty good on them new maps. We got to see Apocalypse, and I believe we got to see
Express.
Express as well.
Yep.
Love seeing those maps in the rotation. They're fun to watch. Apocalypse is a very interesting hardpoint map, but
Oh, I love it.
it's definitely fun to watch, and I love seeing Express. Express is definitely one of my favorite maps. I would have liked to see it in control, but I guess that's besides the point. Not too much to say there. Chicago's doing good. Paris, congrats. They're currently, I believe, 1-1. So yeah, it's weird. The team that we thought was going to be the worst isn't as bad as we thought they would be. But
Yep.
I guess they
True.
did play Minnesota, so there's always room to fail.
Yeah. I mean, still soup. I mean, it's great that they're competing
Soup's the
against
soup.
teams that are in the soup, and they're not competing against teams that are out of the soup. You know, the same
Yeah,
story.
same story, same old story. But their next Saturday matchup, it was Minnesota versus Florida. Once again, we thought Minnesota was going to take this over Florida. They did not. They got 3-0 once again. Rip Minnesota. Be interesting to see what happens with them and how they perform throughout the rest of stage two. Moving on to the last match, we had Dallas versus Seattle. I think every time we said Dallas was going to 3-0 a team, it went to game five. We
Yeah, what's
said we were
going on
going to
with that?
3-0 London, went to game five. We said they were going to 3-0 Seattle, goes all the way to a game five. I believe it went to round 11 too. Honestly, Seattle probably could have beaten Dallas this
See,
series.
this is whenever like it started to be like, oh wait, hold on one second. Seattle did what? You know, like
Yeah,
this was definitely the head turner of the maps. Like, yeah, it's great that they beat Florida or whatever, but I mean, they took Dallas to a game 5.
round 11.
Yeah, round
Both S&Ds
11.
were round 11s.
Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, I mean, kind of you kind of start like scratching your head, wondering what's going on. So,
Yeah, I don't know what's up with Dallas. They just like to. I feel like they're limit testing when they shouldn't be,
I
because
mean, they got a W, so
I think they did get a W in the end. But you look at it, you're like, ew, it's a little scary. Almost
you think
losing to
it's
the soup there, Chef Dallas. You
yeah,
don't want to do that.
you think it's um you think it's limit testing? You think that's
I mean,
that's what we're gonna call
I'm
it?
pretty sure they played Seattle on some of their better like they played them on Checkmate S&D, which is Seattle's best S&D map. They did end up beating them on that,
Right.
but if you're Dallas and you're playing Seattle on their best S&D map, they were 3-0 on Checkmate S&D. Some of that's like, yeah, Dallas, they wanted to play them on this because they wanted to experience something. They wanted to test something out. They wanted to play a really good checkmate search team or something. But yeah, there was definitely, I think, a little bit of limit testing with Dallas in this matchup. And I think they've done that against some of the teams they think are bottom of the barrel. I think maybe that we could attribute that to London. It would definitely be something interesting to see and keep our eyes on with kind of the maps that get vetoed and picked, since now they do have that on broadcast. Thank you very much. I think the graphics for that can be a lot better, and hopefully they will improve upon those.
Right.
Uh, but I think that's definitely going to be something interesting to keep our eyes on when we see Dallas and maybe some of the upper echelon teams play against some of these lower teams that are in the soup, is kind of what maps they are vetoing and that they are playing against them based on kind of what maps those teams have successful records on. Uh, but yeah, any takeaways from any other takeaways from this Dallas Seattle matchup?
Let's see. I think the only other thing that I would like to say is this just this weekend in general really did save some players on Seattle. I would imagine that like if this hadn't gone as well, then Seattle we would also be talking about a roster change for Seattle. I don't know who, but I'm not counting it out yet. It still could happen. Um, but I don't. I mean, I think they're safe for another week. So
Yeah, I think if a change comes for Seattle, it might be after stage two, depending on their performance there. But some interesting things with Dallas, I guess, every matchup outside of the best of nine that they have played, they have either won it 3-0 or they have lost it. Well, they've never gone 3-1 in a match. They are either 3-0 or 3-2 or 0-3 or 2-3. So, uh, little interesting there that they've never won in four or lost in four. But also, going back to the engagements for 10 minutes, I do believe Dallas has the highest average engagements per 10 minutes. The lowest on their team is a 45, with the highest on their team being a 47. So, very high very fast pace, excuse me, team, at least in the hard point, kind of looking at that statistic. But yeah,
yeah. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, just some interesting parity. I mean, you have Atlanta, you have Atlanta down there as the least engagements per 10 minutes, then you have Dallas up there as the most. Some interesting parity between the top teams there. Maybe some difference in play styles and some things maybe to look at
Yeah, one's got
for
Hook the
the
nuke.
yeah. Hook's actually going nuclear this season. But
He
moving
really is though.
on to our another upset. Both you and I thought LAG was going to take this against London in a game 5, but as it would so happen this weekend, London 3-0 LAG.
Paul.
Paul AX
Paul
comes
X.
in.
Yeah, he's a beast. He's absolutely absurd at this game. Like this is hands down his best COD. So,
Well, it's the first COD I'm at least going to be seeing him on stream, but the
true.
first win London get is a 3-0. This might be the team's first 3-0 ever in the CDL. I'm not too certain on that, but that would definitely be an interesting thing to look at. But yeah, Paul X and Zed's also done really good for the team. I do think. I mean, Zed had a really big map one hard point up against LAG. The team as a whole kind of clutched up in search and destroy. I know this weekend they got another S&D win on the board. They're now 2-8 in search. Woohoo! And then they closed it out in the control. So all around good play. I think bringing in Paul definitely going to help them in their search since that was something they were struggling at immensely. Um, and I'm not too sure on kind of the type of player Paul is, at least like in control, but it definitely just seemed to help them overall. I mean, they picked up a win against LAG, who we said is a really strong fundamental team. But as well, LAG did like Vivid kind of went off in those games, and the rest of his team were kind of flat throughout the
Right.
entire season, especially Apathy and Assault. They did not have good performance at all in that London matchup.
There needs to be a time where they need to bring in mental. I mean,
Yeah, you
that's what
think
it really
so?
comes down to. Absolutely. I mean,
We did say I thought that Vivid would get subbed out for Mental really early on. But I mean, Vivid seems to be like their best performer on the team.
most consistent anyway.
Yeah, but maybe do you swap him out because he's just playing too fast for the other players, or like
No,
who do you
I think you
swap
give
out
him.
Mental for?
I think you swap out apathy for mental. And
Apathy?
I don't know
Uh,
if you. And I hate to say that 'cause, I mean
Yeah,
I love the guy, but
I love Apathy. And I know he's been like the one issue I have with subbing out Apathy is I like having that X factor ability of Apathy of like where okay, like right now they're middle of the pack. They're middle of the pack still, even after this loss. I know they lost to London, which is really bad since London. This was the first time London won a series the entire CDL. But if you like, the nice thing about having an X factor is that like he'll be there like to win you series, and so it's sort of like a coin flip. Like you'll be able to win series that maybe you shouldn't if you have this player.
yeah, but then you
Uh,
lose series that you should because he's there. I mean, like what I'm saying is maybe he's just not right as a sub in this line of work.
Yeah,
Uh,
but do you like take that risk? Because if you like, say you make the roster change, you take out Apathy. It's like okay, we bring in this new player. Okay, we can be like uh top 5, top 4. So let's just say something ridiculous.
right.
But we'll never be able to beat number 2 or number 1. But say we leave in the X factor, and then okay, he doesn't have like an on game sometimes, but we still have that ability to have something crazy happen and beat the first or second team. Like it's kind of like balancing, what do you weigh more? Do you weigh more like having the consistency throughout the season, but not having as high of a high, or do you go with having inconsistency through the season, but having the ability to win it all in the end by just having like by just showing up.
I don't think any team right now is winning by just showing up, to be honest. So I mean that's kind of a bad way to put it because I mean there's a lot of work that does go into being that kind of caliber team. Um, Apathy I think can bring a lot to the table on or off the sticks, and I'm not saying he's. I mean, I personally believe he's invaluable as a player, and I think he's a great guy and all of that stuff. Um, he can be that leader that they need. Um, and maybe you don't get rid of apathy. Maybe you switch him to an AR or something. You bring mental in. You drop assault, who I mean I don't think assault's doing that great. To be honest, it's LAG. None of them are really doing that great besides Vivid. So who knows?
Assault's statistically the best player on the team.
I stand corrected. So I mean, then again, like Methods was doing fine, and here we are. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Like
it's hard to
Vivid's
make.
not doing amazing. He has the most engagements on the team, and he had a big game. He had big games this weekend. Fumbling with my words there, but he definitely hasn't been the shining star of the team, especially in S&D. He's actually, it seems like he's gotten caught out quite a bit in S&D when trying to kind of make the plays that he was making kind of during the MW season. Um, so do you just, yeah, I feel like there's way too much for us to kind of look at with this team
True.
that would go into making a roster change of subbing one of these players out and bringing in mental. Um,
I agree.
I would have to look at a lot of stuff before I'd be comfortable with saying
Yeah,
if
this
like
is the
which one of
problem.
these players we should sub out. But I think we can agree that there's potentially potentially an issue. Like this team's just never going to beat Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago,
No,
New
not
York.
right now.
Like you can just list uh, like the teams that they won't beat. And it's just, are they going to be happy with that or not? Because making one roster change isn't going to enable them to beat Atlanta. It's not going to enable them to beat Dallas. So
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not the GMs, and there's a lot, tons, like an absurd amount of factors that go into this. Um, I'd love to say that I have the answers for sure, but I mean, we're just kind of speculating, having fun. So,
yeah, but
oh
LAG, they lose to London 3-0. The next matchup on that weekend was Atlanta versus Toronto. Atlanta won that 3-0.
yeah, knows any, no
So
any.
and then probably the craziest or one of the crazier matchups of the weekend, the one to close it out on, was New York versus the LA Thieves. I had LA taking this 3-2. They
Oh,
almost took it 3-0.
oh boy, this match.
And you had New York taking it 3-2. And New York ended up reverse sweeping the LA Thieves. Mr. Clayster over
X
there
Games
going
mode,
99 overall,
built different, 100%. Yeah.
falling off the map.
So here's my question with this one: did Dallas Empire drop the right old guy?
Uh, it's a good question.
I
It's a
mean,
good question.
you got like a 33-time world champ, more rings than anybody else, and then you have a guy like Clayster, who's been on the he's been the back
It's
to
hard to tell
back
because
champ.
I think what Clayster's doing for New York at right now is what he needs to do for New York at the time, and what Crimsix is doing for Dallas is what he needs to be doing for that team in its current state. And I think you could take Clay out and he could fill Crim's role in Dallas, and you could probably take Crim out of Dallas and put him in for New York, and he'd be doing kind of like what Clay's doing there. It's hard to tell without actually doing that, uh, but I feel it's more not like which player, like did they make the right decision? Like it's almost impossible to say that without seeing what happens. It's more so those players at their within their current teams, they're fulfilling the roles that they need to. Like Clay for this team needs to be freaking drill sergeant, commando, slaying machine, ponytail, like riding a unicorn. I don't know. Like he just
Jeez.
needs to be disgusting for this team. Uh,
Yeah, and Krim kind of doesn't. He can kind of just like command the field, and he'll he'll win most of his gun battles. Not all of them for sure. I mean, stats wise, will show that, but I mean, he can't quite uh he can't quite close out the distance like he would like Clay is recently.
yeah, but
Uh,
I think the more, maybe not the more interesting conversation, but uh, the more important conversation is probably over with the LA Thieves, since they do make a roster change after this loss. They take out Temp, who won them the S&D against Toronto. Otherwise, they would have lost that if he didn't win his 1v1 after some crazy challenges out of Kenny and Slasher to bring about the 1v1 when it was a 1v3. So Temp got them to that round 11 where they did end up winning it, and he's the one kick to the curve for Venom. So I want to get your opinions on Venom and if this is indeed the right change for the LA Thieves. Since I'll bring it up one last time. Last time you'll hear me talk about this stat, probably the whole year. Engagements per 10 minutes. Slasher, Kenny, TJ Halley, all between a 48.5 and a 47. Temp is at the lowest on the team at a 44.4. So I'll go to you for your opinions on Venom and if this was the right change.
right change. Hmm. Time will tell if Temp was the problem. Time will tell. Um, personally, you know how it goes with me. Like I can't stand TJ Halley. Just something about him. But
Just take TJ Halley out for respawns, put him in for that S&D
yeah, I
prowess.
guess.
I mean, he's going off at S&D. Like you can't even say that.
Oh
He's
yeah,
been
no,
doing
he's
his
beast
work
mode.
in S&D.
Yeah, he's Iceman in SD. That is for sure. So that being said, um, I mean his respawn game is terrible. It feels like everybody's just trying to you know, just absolutely destroy him, just shit all over him. I feel like that's what people do. They just run around the map and they're like, oh hey look, there's TJ. Like, let's get him.
Oh,
So
TJ's holding that, Hetty? I'll chow.
yeah, I'll chow. Oh yeah, I got that. Oh TJ. Oh yeah, no, kid's dog water. That's the kind of thing that it would go through my head. Like I said, I don't know if I don't know if it was Temp the right call. I don't know. Maybe it's just the vibes. Maybe Venom looks better on camera because it is a hoodie org after all. So, um, jokes aside, um,
Oh
I
god. Temp
Venom.
wasn't cutting it in the hoodie modeling campaigns.
Yeah, exactly. They were like, it's not working out. Um, so that being said, Venom is actually legit. Like the kid is electric, nuts. Like he is so absurdly good. Um,
He was another player on Westar, wasn't he? So now the only players from Westar that haven't gotten picked up are Gravity and Zapdius, I do believe.
yeah, but Zap's not gonna get picked up. There's just there's just too much drama surrounding Zap. Um, Tom Gravity is kind of a uh, so he was the first guy that got offered a contract, a pro contract, and they were like, "Nah, we're playing hot right now. Like, go away," which is
Who
crazy.
offered him the contract?
London, I believe it was
No,
London.
London offered Paul, and Paul declined the
Oh,
first
originally.
time
Oh,
around.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Never mind. I had my guys backwards in. Yeah, so I mean, they're all gross. Like they're all capable of playing in the league. It's the fact of the matter is that nobody wants to put up with Zap right now because of all of the Wester drama. Since he was the guy who technically owns Wester. Um, so nobody wanted to put up with that. Um, that's why they split and all that. That's why two of them have already found spots on pro teams. And I have to say, Venom is a beast. Like, don't sleep on Venom. He is quite good. So I think there's a lot of really good young talent in the challenger scene and just the AM scene in general. And I'm glad that these guys are getting their chance.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we've already had 5 rookies come into the season. Paul, Fire, Neptune, um, Paul, Fire, Neptune. Who else? Oh, Venom and Standy and Insight. So 6. I feel like I'm probably missing someone, but we've had a lot of rookies come in this season already, and they've all done well on their teams, even if their teams are not doing as well as they would like to. Obviously, you still have kind of the old guard dominating, and we haven't really had a team come in with 2 rookies, kind of like Dallas did last year. But I mean, Dallas, they were underperforming at the start of the season. They weren't really doing that great when you saw Ilya and Shotzi kind of at the beginning of the season, but then they ended up being world champs. So maybe, who knows, we could see one of these teams with these rookies come in and do well. But you still kind of look at the other end and like, yeah, but these teams with the rookies that are coming in, oh, Diamond Con as well as another one. But you look at the teams with the rookies, and outside of New York, they don't have they don't have Crimsix, Clay, or Hook backing up the rookies. So
right,
a little bit different of a scenario, but it's still great to see kind of all the fresh talent kind of come into the league.
definitely.
It like fresh talent to the CDL, even though they've been around for probably quite a while, at least in challengers or even in, I guess, maybe the S&D scene or something.
Well,
Um,
I think so. Somebody was saying like, yo, it's like a buddy league and everything, and Formal like snapped at it immediately. He was like, yeah, it's like a buddy league. Like if we don't play with you, we don't know who you are. We aren't gonna want a team. They aren't gonna want a team with you. So I mean, you have to get established, and you have to show that like to show these guys who are professionals who've been doing this longer than anybody else that you're able to keep up with them. So that's a challenge in itself.
yeah, yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of hesitancy to make roster changes, and I can understand it. Um, but I think at the end of the day, if you're a good player and you aren't kind of a dickhead in the challenger scene, you'll eventually kind of find your way into into the pro scene, given when spots become available or if a team is struggling and you're the kind of that next guy up.
True.
But yeah, LA Thieves, they make the roster change. New York, uh, still looking okay. Sometimes not okay. But you know what? They're top 4 right now. They're tied up there with Chicago in CDL points.
Right.
So their season's still going strong currently. Still not going to probably see Hydra at least for a little while longer come into that lineup. But I think that's going to do it for the recap.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to talk about before we move on to a rapid fire prediction, since this episode's running longer than I think either of us were planning on it,
True.
was Parasite was on the podcast and he talked about kind of Wuskins. And this was a talking point that I wanted to bring up since it was something that I know I had said kind of last year about Enable. And it was that uh, the question of whether or not the player in deserves to be in the league isn't really the question that needs to be asked. I think we kind of both agree Wuskins kind of deserves, at least skill wise, to be in the league.
Sure.
But is their passion there and their commitment there to get into the league? Because right now, Wuskins, he's not competing in challengers. So it's kind of like, what is he doing to kind of deserve a spot in the league? He's not really doing anything to deserve a spot back in the league.
True.
He's kind of just kicking back and relaxing, streaming Warzone maybe. I'm not entirely sure kind of what he's doing with his day-to-day life. That probably makes sense that he's
Well, yeah,
streaming Warzone
he's
since
irrelevant right now.
he had some like relatively small following. But you look at 0-0, he's playing in challengers. I know he definitely doesn't want to be doing that. Methods is going to be playing in challengers. Like there's a bunch of people that didn't get spots or lost their spots that are competing in challengers because they want to prove themselves again. They want to get
Exactly.
back into the league. And Weskins right now, he's not really doing any of that. And so if you're an owner, and I like Weskins a lot. We talked, I think, relatively highly of him all of last year, even though like we didn't quite agree with the way London was playing the map with that kind of like one player doing really well and the rest not doing really well.
Right.
But like right now, he's not doing anything to deserve a spot in the league. And that was something that we talked about with Enable kind of last year was what is Enable doing to get his spot back? He wasn't doing shit. He wasn't doing shit last year to get a spot back. He knows he's a bad S&D player, and he didn't practice S&D at all during his time off from the team. He might have been playing in eights or something lackadaisically, but he wasn't doing like he couldn't compete in challengers, but there were definitely other things that he could be doing to help improve his game so that if a team offered him a spot or if a team asked him, so what did you do last year after you got dropped to help improve your game to deserve a spot on my team? And he answers, oh, nothing. I just streamed and made some YouTube videos. Why the fuck would I want you back? Or
Yeah.
why would I want you on my team? Like, honestly, I think that's a huge issue with kind of a lot of these players is that they feel they deserve a spot. They feel like they have this privilege that, like, if you talk to any, it's like you don't have no,
No.
like the, um, and it's honestly probably a miracle that Enable is with the Oak Boys, at least for him, because if otherwise
That's
he'd
a buddy
be,
deal.
yeah, he'd be a YouTuber. He'd have to like go back to college or something. He wouldn't have a job.
He could play in the
Kind of straight
CCL.
up. You play what?
He could play in the CCL.
The Collegiate COD League?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are some colleges offering scholarships now, so it's probably not too bad of a opportunity for some of these old retired pros if there's not like if there's no job opportunity with your friends over at the Oak Boys. Um,
Yeah, if
but
you aren't like an established name in Call of Duty, you know,
yeah,
I mean, there's a couple of guys who are already coming, like Fastballa, and a couple of those guys are gonna end up they're gonna be playing in the CCL next year. You know, they don't really have their name out there yet, and it's a decent enough way to get your name out there. So,
yeah.
um,
I mean, it's a great way to go to college and have some of your tuition paid for. If the college offers scholarships for that, I'm not sure with CCL. Is there I'm assuming there's probably prize money of some sorts to the winners.
there is prize money.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah, so
it's
that can always be helpful for paying for tuition as well.
$25,000 prize pool, split out between the top 8 teams. Um,
Okay.
so it's good money. Like I think first
Yeah.
prize takes home like 11 grand, 12 grand maybe.
Divided
Um,
by 4 players, so
yeah.
about
Uh,
3,000 a player,
but I mean there are
which isn't
schools
bad.
that are offering scholarships right now for it. There
Yeah.
are, and that number will grow year after year. So I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Getting a little off topic
true, we
here,
are.
but
But
yeah,
like the point is that like you're right. If you're not working at it actively, if you're not trying to like figure out a way to legitimately get better, to invest in your game, as Caesar Skies would put it, then
yeah, a lot
um,
of like I just have such an issue with how a lot of these players operate. Like they go to bed at like 4 a.m. sleep until like 5 p.m., get up, scrim, and then go back to sleep or something. Like you look at kind of Chicago Optic, it's a bit different for them because they have content, a lot of content that they have to produce and whatnot. So they obviously have a lot less free time than
Yeah,
some of the
Hector
other
works those
teams.
guys. Like
Yeah,
that's a
but if
job.
you're one of these other teams and you're not producing like any content at all, what are you doing? Like
That's true.
you're literally scrimming for like what 6 hours or something, and then maybe you go over some VOD. But I, like I feel it's very easy to get up, do a little streaming before scrims. You do your scrims or whatnot. Uh, or maybe you have your VOD sesh before scrims, and then you try and do what you discussed during the VOD sesh in your scrims. When you're done scrimming, it's probably just throw on the stream or something. Like I feel like there's a lot more that the players could be doing if they manage their time a bit more efficiently. And I also feel like uh, scrims are incredibly inefficient the way they are currently done. But I think that's probably a topic for another day that
Yeah,
we'll
I'm sure.
discuss. Since that's like a big talking point in and of itself. But and we're already like an hour 20 into this, so I
Yeah,
think
we're
it's
a little
time for
ahead.
the rapid fire predictions. You ready? I'll start. I'll
Yeah.
let you kick it off. Paris versus the Dallas Empire.
Uh, I think it's a pretty safe 3-1 there.
Safe 3-1. I do agree. Next one on Thursday, we got some pretty bad matchups on Thursday. We do say that, but
Yeah, watch.
maybe we'll see Dallas push to Game 5. Who knows? I'm gonna go for the Chicago Minnesota matchup 3-1. I see you're doing the same as well. London versus the LA Thieves. Yeah, this I think could be a bit of an interesting one, but I think I'm going to agree with you as well. 3-2 over to the LA Thieves. Moving on to our last Friday matchup, it's New York versus LAG. I think this is going to be a lot of agreeances here, which is annoying because I want to move ahead of you in our total cumulative predictions. Correct?
Hey, I'm right.
Uh,
There's a reason why you're agreeing with me. That's all I'm saying.
yeah.
So,
But yeah, I'm going to agree with you. New York over LAG 3-1. First Saturday matchup, London versus New York. You're going London here.
yeah, so turns out I think that London's actually pretty
Big
hot.
Paul X fan. Big, massive Paul X fan.
It's not even that I'm a big Paul X fan. I think that London has the capacity to go massive against the subliners. It's there. It could happen. It's any given Sunday. Subliners have yet to be crestfallen in a sense, and I think it's high time for them to. I don't want to see it, but I mean, if the shoe fits. So that's
Yeah, I hope you're not just giving me a free dub here, but yeah, I'm gonna go New York over London. I'm gonna know New York. I'm gonna say it's a 3-1. I'm gonna be a little more confident in my
all right.
prediction, a little more bold.
All right.
Our second Saturday matchup is one that you don't really need to be bold to predict correctly, and that's going to be Atlanta versus the LA Thieves. Both going to give that a 3-1 to the way of Atlanta. Closing out Saturday, we got LAG versus Toronto. It's going to be a bit more of an interesting one. You have Fundamentals versus the new Toronto. LAG did not have a great showing last weekend. They lost to I just forgot who they lost to. They lost to London 3-0.
Yep. They got smoked.
Now they're
But
up against Toronto.
but no Zenny, no Winnie.
No Zinni, no Winnie.
No Zenny,
Sticking
no
with it.
Winnie. Till somebody picks up Zenny.
All right. Uh yeah, I don't want to be swayed too much by last week. And so I'm going to give it to LAG. I'm going to give it to them 3-2 in the end. I think it's actually going to be a pretty darn close matchup. It might be around that time that certain teams start to catch on and actually have solid fundamentals. And then when that happens, LAG is probably going to start to fall down the standings quite rapidly because if you have a team with better skill in equal fundamentals, that team's going to come out on top the majority of the
Generally, yep.
time. And moving on to our Sunday matchup. First one, we got Seattle versus Paris. And you're down Paris here. You're down in the Paris boys. Going with Seattle 3-1.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not crazy to say that Seattle could beat Paris. I
No, you're
think
not.
that I think that
Definitely not crazy.
that's a fair one, especially with their performance last week. Paris played fine, but I don't know. I'm just gonna give it to Seattle.
Giving it to Seattle. Yeah,
I,
it's interesting because you can't even say if it goes game 5 if that Seattle will lose it since they are actually a good S&D team
yeah, they're
this
actually not a
year.
bad S&D team. They really aren't.
Yeah, they last year they were a bad. Last year I said they were a bad Dom team last year. Last year they were a really good Dom team. Why did I say that? That was like the one game mode that they were good at.
Right.
So a bit mixed up there, misremembering. They were a really bad search team, and they were also halfway okay-ish hardpoint team, but they were decent Dom. Yeah, I'm gonna go Paris here in the end. I think I'm gonna give it to 3-1. I'm not trusting Pristini yet. He's way too inconsistent too often. It was one weekend. We'll see how he shows up this next weekend.
True.
Gotta have some differences in our predictions, you know. Hopefully I'll move closer to you, lessen the gap instead of widening it. Moving on to second Sunday matchup, it's Dallas versus Minnesota. Yeah, I can agree. This is a pretty easy one for us. I'm gonna say 3-1. You know, Dallas, they like to test some
Yeah, might as
things
well just
out
put it
every
3-2 Dallas, you know.
yeah, might as well put a 3-2 Dallas down. I'm not gonna be that bold just yet. But
Nah, it's a
closing
hot
it out,
trio.
Sunday, you have Florida beating Chicago 3-2.
Like I said, fate meant to be.
I
And
feel like you got some spicy ass predictions this week.
hey, you gotta I gotta pull away from you somehow.
You're
So,
already ahead of me. You don't need to pull any further away. Don't leave me behind.
well, get big brain, pick Florida over Chicago.
Big old wrinkly brain. I'm gonna take Chicago over Florida.
Coward.
I'm gonna say, yeah, 3-2, 3-2, 3-1. I feel better. Yeah, I think realistically, I think this should be a 3-1 with how Florida has been playing. I don't think Florida has been playing insane enough for them to make it to a game 5. If it does, though, could get a little spicy there. Since we all know how scary Big Wake is
Big
in
wake,
those S&Ds.
big
I
wake.
think he's still the top S&D player. Actually, I think he got passed up by Insight, but
Well, that's
top S&D
what, two
player with
games.
the most per map,
So
we'll say. Still.
yeah, give Insight the same amount of time Awakening's had in the league, and I
Yeah,
mean,
and then we'll see.
then we'll see. Like, he had a good first week. Happy to be here, Insight. Insight's or Wake's been around. He's like, this kind of sucks. Whole whole inconsistent thing. So, but he's a beast. He's great.
Yeah, definitely a really good player. That's going to close it out for our rapid fire predictions, which is going to close out this episode of Just Another Esports Podcast. Hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have a fantastic week watching these matches. And we'll see you back here on Wednesday, my dudes.
Wednesday, my dudes.
We're out.
Ah!